I think this is probably about 20, 25 minutes of content.
Okay.
It's really only 15. I just know us. We'll go over. But the gist of what this is based off of conversations that I've been having for 19 years about podcasting. And, just people think they are advertising their show and they aren't advertising their show and wondering why no one is listening. So this was kind of like 3 tips that you could implement that are truly advertising or doing promotional work for your show. And the first one is just dead simple. Just tell people about your show. That's, so I went and I looked at Riverside actually has like some 2025 podcast trends. And the number one thing, the number one way podcast listeners say that they find a new show is by being told about a new show by someone else. And so I'm not going to do the episode until we get into it, but just I was like, it's remarkable to me that so few people tell people about their show, or name their show something that can be found, or actually effectively use social media. So I thought this was like 3 tips, something we can give somebody here's some tactical things you can go do to better position, better market your show.
Okay. And I think that's something we can knock out real quick because we have mentioned that in the past, but I think it would be irresponsible not to mention it just in case somebody comes to us.
Okay.
We can say, we've talked about it, and I'll have to go back and look and see which episodes we talked about it in, but we talked about it in these episodes. If you want to learn more, you can check it out there.
All right. Do you need to look over this or are you good?
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, if you want to go into it, we can launch right into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. In 3, 2. Welcome to Beyond the Post with Robb Dunwood and Bodie Grimm. I'm Robb Dunwood.
And I'm Bodie Grimm.
And in this episode, we're going to talk about podcast marketing and promotion, some of the things that you can do to effectively get more people to listen to your show. A lot of people think they're doing podcast marketing, but they really aren't. So we've got 3 tips that you can relatively easily implement. They're going to definitely see more people coming in and checking your show out.
Yeah. And it's kind of touched on this a little bit, Rob, in your intro, but it's not about announcing that you have a new show. It's about giving somebody a reason to listen to your new episode.
Mm-hmm. So, Bodie, one of the things that I was taking a look at, I believe it was on Riverside, and Riverside had a podcast survey where they were surveying podcasters and podcast listeners. And on the listener side, one of the questions was, how do you find new shows? And the number one way that podcast listeners find new podcasts is by direct recommendation. And this has been the case for years and years and years. People say, how do you find new shows? Somebody told me about it and I went and checked it out and it was awesome. That is usually how somebody finds a new show. It is overwhelmingly the number one way. So one of the things that I do is that whenever I get into how do I grow my show type conversation, the first question I ask is, who specifically have you asked to listen to your podcast? And almost everyone will answer, oh, well, whenever we put out a new episode, I put a social media post out. The problem with that is that usually the social media post says something like, hey, we've got a new episode out. Go check it out wherever you find your podcast. And that is not promotion. That is not marketing. That is barely even an announcement because you're making the person that you want to listen have to do work. They've now got to go find your stuff. Bodie, half of folks don't even put a link to their podcast when they say, go find it wherever wherever you find podcasts. And they say, well, the reason I do that is because if I put a link in, that it's going to get depressed by Instagram or it's going to get depressed by Facebook or TikTok doesn't allow the links, whatever the case is. Well, I don't want to put a link in there because I don't want fewer people to see it. But the problem is that you just made it difficult for somebody to listen. Number one. And then number 2, you told them in such a way that if they didn't already care, that's not going to make them care.
Yeah. In that situation, you can use a program like Headliner app. You can create 30 to 90 second clip. And you can say, hey, here's a new podcast, and then use that clip, make sure that it's really engaging and a fun part of the show. Use that clip to make people want to listen to your show versus listen, I love my oldest, but I don't, unless she sends me what she's doing or I see it specifically on one of the social media accounts we follow each other on. I'm not going out and looking for it,
Right.
Yeah. So, and she will very often, which is very kind, and I feel very honored. She'll send things before they're done just to get my thoughts on them. But in general, right? If you don't specifically ask me to listen to this or to watch this, it's going to be hard to give me a reason just because you announced that it's there. But if you have that social media clip in there or something that's easy for people to see what you're doing without committing a lot of time, you're more likely to get that conversion.
Right. So just tip number one is tell people about your show. I've got a saying, Bodie, I've said it on this show many times. You should be telling people about your show at every opportunity when it is not inappropriate to do so. And the reason I say that is because when I ask folks, well, who have you told about your show? They say, well, I haven't told anybody. It's like, no, who specifically have you told about your show? It's like headlights or deer in the headlights. I haven't done that. Or maybe they did it when they first launched it and they had maybe an email list, or they went and, told all their friends, hey, I'm starting a new podcast, go check it out. But that is literally the extent of what most podcasters have done to tell people about their show, when the reports say that the number one way that people find show is by word of mouth, is literally by somebody saying, hey, go check this show out. And who better to tell someone about your show than you? So I just say that, when you are marketing, when you are doing promotion, make sure that you are telling people individually, hey, I got a new podcast episode out. I'd love for you to go check it out. If you just do that, you will see an increase in your numbers. And most people who aren't doing these kind of things, they're not pulling in 1,000 episodes or 1,000 downloads an episode. They're probably not even doing 500 an episode, which if you're doing 500 downloads an episode, you're a top 1% podcaster. So that's a lot. But most people aren't doing that. So some of the pushback that I would get is that, well, is that really effective? And it's like, if you're not doing it, if you told one person every day for a year, hey, go listen to my show, and they listen and they love it and they become a listener, and you're only getting 300-400 people right now downloading and listening to your show, you would significantly see an increase just because you went and said, hey, listen to my show. People tend to do things if they like you when you ask them to do them, if you make it easy for them to do it. So once again, podcast tip number one, as far as marketing and promotion, tell people about your show.
Yeah. And then I think, Rob, there is benefit in having folks who are in the community, like promoting your show, like telling people about your show, telling people that know and trust them, hey, this is a really good podcast on whatever topic you're talking about. And I'll give you an example that I wasn't really expecting this week. Somebody, one of my listeners sent me an email and they said, hey, can I have your logo? And I was like, okay, here's the Kilowatt logo. I sent it off and I was like, what's up? And he says, oh, I'm going to a car show and I'm going to show off my electric car. And I'm making this board and I'm putting all the podcasts that I listen to that are on this topic. So when people come by, they can see kind of the things that have kind of influenced me, and I can kind of share this. It's not just my show. It's a bunch of shows that are on there. And I thought that's a really interesting idea. He came up with this completely on his own. I didn't ask him to do it, but I think that's a really good way to, just like that, ask me about my podcast shirt. That's a great way for people walking by and asking you questions about your car. And they're like, oh, what's this? They can tell. And you get more listeners.
Man, I've probably have 6 or 7 of those shirts now. It is, and we could put a link to, a picture of me wearing a shirt. I'll provide that to you, Bodie. Okay. But if you wear a t-shirt that says, ask me about my podcast, and you go out in public and you're not afraid to have people come up and talk to you, people will come up and talk to you and ask you about your podcast. I have no recollection of wearing that shirt in public and not having at least one person say, hey, tell me about your show. And sometimes I forget that I have the shirt on. So it kind of, oh, wow, they just asked me about my podcast. Oh, wait a minute. I got a shirt on that says ask me about my podcast. They're just doing what I asked them to do. But just doing something like that, it breaks the ice and it gives you permission to go and talk to someone about your show. Because I think one of the problems that a lot of people have is that they feel like, well, I've already told this person about my show. I want to keep telling them about my show because then they're not going to go and listen. And what really happens is that they probably don't remember that you told them about it. It's not, it takes 3 to 7 times for something to resonate with someone. So they need to see it a lot. But when you wear a t-shirt that evokes a conversation, you then can feel comfortable in having that conversation about your content.
For sure.
So Bodie, the second thing that I have down here, the number 2 way podcast listeners find new shows is through podcast app search and recommendation charts. So think of going to iTunes and just searching for a podcast. It's like I want to see a podcast on EVs. So you don't know what show you're looking for. You just know you want to see a show, or you want to hear a show on EVs. You go to Spotify for, definitely if you go to YouTube for, YouTube has the second biggest search engine on the world. It potentially could become number 1 because now so many people are actually using chat bots to do their search directly in them. But YouTube right now is the number 2 search engine in the world. So definitely, and we can say this for another show, there is good reason to have your show on YouTube, regardless of whether it's video show or not. Even if it's audio only, you probably want to stick that over there just because you get some of that YouTube search algorithm magic. But the number 2 way to find the show is through podcast search and through podcast app recommendations. But the problem for many podcasters is that they simply aren't set up to be easily found for either of these things. They aren't set up for search. They definitely aren't set up to be recommended in a chart that you might see on iTunes or Spotify or some other podcasting app. So one of the biggest things that most podcasters have as far as not being able to easily be found is because of their name. They'll name their show something like Conversations with Jen, or their show will be, that was really fun. You should have fun too. These names might be cute and they mean something to the podcaster, but they mean nothing to the podcast listener who doesn't already know about the show. And I've even had some issues with this. One of my more popular shows is called The Tech John. Now, tech is in the name. The word John, if you're from Philly, you know what that means. But if you're not from Philly, you probably don't necessarily know what that means. And that show was done pretty well with just the Tech John. But we did something that I recommend to most people who don't have keywords in the title of their show. I call it a 10 to 12 word title extension. So if you think of the Tech John's name now is like the Tech John. And I'm paraphrasing here, but it's like, weekly tech news from perspectives you don't see in everyday or mainstream media or something like this. So it's telling you what it is. It's a tech news show and the perspectives are different. In fact, I actually might even have the keywords, black tech enthusiast in it. So you know what you're going to get when you look at the title of the show. And folks said, well, that's a long title. Your title is like 13, 14 characters, or not characters, words long. And the name of the show, is only for the search engine. It's only for the podcasting app. If you go look at my artwork, it just says the Tech John on it. If you look at whenever I'm posting stuff, I just say just the Tech John on it. This is specifically so people will see the keywords that I'm hoping that you are looking for to find a show like the Tech John. It's a weekly technology news show. And we talk about tech and how tech affects and disaffects the black community and black culture. So I've got those keywords all in that title extension, and anyone who's searching for things like black tech show, black tech podcast, technology podcast with black hosts, anything like that, my show will jump up to the number 1, number 2 spot on whatever search engine you're looking at, because I've made that title of the show, at least as far as those search engines, those podcast applications are concerned, I've made it so that they will actually have the keywords that people might be looking for to find a show like mine.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, Rob. And especially if somebody's never done a podcast before, there are certain things on the back end of almost every podcast host that you're going to have to set up, right? When you go to submit your podcast, you got to have a title. You should have a subtitle, but you don't have to have one. But then you're going to have a summary of what your podcast is. And this is all searchable and discoverable by the search engines. And then underneath that, you're going to have like categories you can put in your website and stuff like that. But then there's keywords. And these are the things that Rob's talking about for Kilowatt, my keywords mostly involve electric vehicles, although they do also involve like renewable energy and autonomous driving and stuff like that. And I'm just going through these, and I need to go update them because some of it, this is quite old actually. Mm-hmm. But that kind of stuff is going to help you help you with discoverability.
It definitely does. I'm looking at listen notes right now, and if I remember correctly, when I would search for the Tech John before, if I would just not search for the Tech John, if I just searched for like Black Tech Podcast, the Tech John would make it to the top 15. Sometimes it would dip into the top 10. But when I did a title extension, and like now the Tech John, Black Tech Enthusiast, covering the week's top tech news and how tech affects Black culture. Now, because I've got all those keywords in there, if you just type in Black Tech, it's number 2. If you type in Black Tech News, it's number 3. If you type in Black Tech Podcast, it's number 2. These are the things that my show are, that people most search for when they don't know my show, but come upon it. And we have seen, probably since I did this back at the beginning of the summer, late spring, when I actually added a 10-word extension to, one of my, primary shows, we saw about a 24% uptick in traffic. Everything else being equal. The only thing we changed was we added these keywords. So literally every show now gets, about 24% more traffic than it did when we were, building the show back then. We're still growing monthly, percent or two, every month since we've been doing the show for 4 years now. But to see a 24% bump, that is significant. And, for a show that does get thousands of downloads, it's pretty, if you get 1,000, we get an additional 240 people coming to the show simply because we changed the name of the show. So that's something that I strongly, recommend that folks do if they are trying to get their show. And I understand that show titles is personal. It's people's baby. But if you are not infamous or famous and you have the name of yourself in your show as the primary keywords, unless someone's looking for you, they simply aren't going to find your show. If your show has a cute name to it, I have a show called SMR Podcast. Most people have no idea what SMR even stands for, but it's a horrible name for the podcast. What we did was we built that show, it's been going for, I think, since 2008, 2009. So we just had first mover advantage. But SMR doesn't mean anything. People thought it was our initials or something like that. It's not. It stood for a company called Simple Mobile Review. And when the show first started, we were covering the company Simple Mobile and we were reviewing their phones. Horrible name because that company is no longer around and we still have the name of the show. But when we come back to doing episodes, we're going to do a significant rebrand on the show and make it so that people can find the show based off of what we talk about and not what the name of the old show was.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there still needs to be some SMR in there somewhere, but I agree with you. It's definitely.
Well, see, that's the thing.
Got to pay homage.
Keep SMR in the logo, but as far as the search engines are concerned, let me tell you what the show's about because that's what people would ultimately search for.
What about, and I maybe gave away this one a little too early, Rob, in our first one, but what about social media?
That is the number 3 way, according to this Riverside.fm study that we looked at. The number 3 way podcast listeners find new shows is via social media. Now, this is in direct, it's directly opposed to what a lot of podcasters tell you. Podcasters will tell you social media doesn't work to promote your podcast. And the reason is because, you weren't promoting your podcast. You were announcing your podcast. I don't tell people to not announce their podcast, but that is not promotion. For every show that I do, there is at some point a social media post that comes out and says, hey, this show just, is now available. We'll go a little further into it and tell you what the show's about, but that's an announcement. We're letting the community know that, hey, this show is out there, but that's not a promotion. A promotion on social media has to do all the things that any other good formed social media post does. It's got to have an attention grabbing hook. It's got to have clear and concise copy, and it has to be a beneficial call to action. So you just telling me that, hey, new episode of Kilowatt is out. if I'm not an EV owner, if I'm not already a listener of Kilowatt, if I'm not interested in the fact that you have a new podcast out, you announcing it does nothing to promote it for me. But if I'm, but if you have an episode on that new Escalade IQ with the 50, I think it's a 57-inch display in there. I think it's the biggest display in an EV at this point. And you're talking about the cars. Like, oh, I'm interested in that. Maybe I'll go listen. So it's the same thing you have to do for any good formed social media post. It's got to have a good hook on it. You got to give people a reason to continue to read the post. You got to give them clear and concise copy about here is what's in this episode to hook them even further. And then you've got to have a beneficial call to action. Having them come listen to your show simply because you released it is not a reason for them to listen. That's a reason for you to want them to. So you've got to give them a reason. In this episode, we're going to be discussing why this may not be the EV that we thought it was. You put a little mystery in there. Say, hey, I want to know what these guys have to say about why this ridiculously expensive Escalade IQ is not potentially not the car to go with. But if you do those things, you now are promoting. You are now marketing your show. You're giving people a reason to listen. You're letting them know where they can come and listen. And then the last thing is that when you are using this, you've got to make it easy for them to listen. So. I personally am I do this. I'm a perpetrator of this crime. I tell people all the time at the end of a social media post, you can find the show wherever you find your podcast. But I'm talking specifically to people who are already listening to the show. That doesn't do anything for someone who doesn't necessarily know how to listen to a show. So one of the things that you should be doing, in addition to using social media effectively when you're telling someone about your show, is making it easy for them to listen. Don't go make them find your show on whatever platform. Use use a link tree or use one of the podcasting specific link apps to where you can put in the name of your show in an app, and then that app will literally give every single way that someone can listen to the show. And all they have to do is just click on the right link and it'll open up right in their podcast player. I create something for some of my shows called a listen to page. So I always have a domain name for our shows, but I will do something like listen2.thetechjohn.com or listen2.beyondthepost.fm. And what these listen to pages they're just a single page, a landing page that just gives people the easiest way to consume the content. They don't have to do anything. They literally just had to click on a link. It'll take them directly to listen on iTunes, listen on Spotify, watch on YouTube, or however you consume podcasts is the last link. And it'll just open up a drop down with every single podcast player that this particular app that we use has in it. And there's probably over 20 different ways you could listen to a podcast. So the goal here is to use social media effectively, but make it easy for the person to listen once you've told them about the show, because people aren't going to do a whole lot of work to go find your show. They just aren't.
Nope. Another tip on the listen to, if you use a service like podcastpage.io, which is what I use for my show. Mm-hmm. If you go to 918digital.com, you can see it, right? You'll see the Kilowatt. That's the main podcast that I have. But if you go to latest episode, which is down a little bit, it'll show you all the latest episodes for Kilowatt. But it also has Beyond the Post in there, and it has Shuffle Playlist in there too. And it's all the latest stuff from the very beginning. So you can make, and we'll go into this in a future episode, but you can make your job easier sometimes by subscribing. If you're going to have a website anyway, why not have a website that that displays all of your stuff?
Right. And the goal here is to make it easy. People have a whole lot of choice on what they do on the internet, on what they do on their smartphones. So they may say, I want to listen to your show, but they click on the link for the show. And now they've got to, I got to sign in the Substack for this, or I have to do, I've got to do some extra steps. I was meaning to do it, but I'm not going to do it right now. I'll come back to it. And that's the worst thing that can happen to someone or happen to the podcaster, is to have somebody that wants to listen to your show. They go try to do it. It wasn't easy. So they go away with the plan to come back. We know what happens. People don't come back. They just don't remember. It's out of sight, out of mind. So you want to make sure that if you are using social media, and you probably should be, it's the third most effective way that people find new podcasts. You want to make sure that you are using the social media effectively, do the attention grabbing hook, a clear and concise copy, and a beneficial call to action. And then lastly, when you do those three things, make sure that your link is easy for them to follow. So there is not a lot of steps they've got to get to your particular episode.
So Rob, if I was going to sum up this episode and just briefly, I would sum it up as you got to tell people about your show.
That is the most basic one. And it's the thing, Bodie, it sounds simple when we say it because it is simple. It's a simple thing to do, but we have got to get into the habit of just telling people about our podcast. As I say, tell people about your podcast at every opportunity. You have to do so when it isn't inappropriate. So you shouldn't be at somebody's wedding or somebody's funeral talking about your podcast. That's not the place to do it. But when you're having a conversation and it's not inappropriate to bring your show up, the conversation kind of leads into, oh, I could tell them about my show right here. Absolutely do that. And don't be worried about if you've told them before or if they've heard it before. Here's what's going to happen. If you run into somebody that you've told about your podcast before and they haven't listened and you tell them again, only one of two things is going to happen. They will continue to not listen, which is where you were when you started, or they'll go and listen because, oh yeah, this is the second time you told me this. Let me go check it out.
Yeah.
So tell people about your show all the time. Repeatedly wear a t-shirt that asks people to ask you about your show, so that you make opportunities for yourself to have conversations about your show. But that is definitely the first thing and one of the most effective things you can do, because that is the number one way that people find new shows is by word of mouth.
And then the next thing is make it easy to find your show.
Make it easy to find your show. So I know that people are tied to their names of their show, but if you are not getting traffic from the podcasting apps, that means that one of two things is happening. You either have a cute name that nobody would ever think of to look for in order to find your show, or you've named your show after yourself and you are not famous or infamous. So unless they already know you, they're not looking for you. So you want to name your show, if you can, something that people would actually search for. If I were starting a podcast on growing a podcast audience, I might call the show Podcast Audience Growth, because that's exactly what somebody would search for if that's what they're looking to do. Now that name's probably taken, so I might have to do Podcast Audience Growth and then do a 10-word extension and really explain what it is. But you want to simply just tell someone what the name of your show is, or you should say you should actually have someone be able to search and find your show by what the name of the show is, by what they searched for, not by because they already know you. And if you can't change the name, because I do know some people are so tied to the name they just can't do that, add a 10-word extension in. So it is, Cooking with Chris is the name of the show. And then you have a 10-word extension about exactly the kind of stuff that you're cooking. Chris, if you are cooking, high protein meals for people who are on a high protein diet, you want to get those keywords in, because those are the kind of people that are searching for specific type of cooking shows, and you want them to find you. Cooking with Chris, they're not going to find it based on that.
Yeah. And there's another thing to that, Rob. When you went to Listen Notes, I went to Listen Notes as well, right? I typed in EV podcast. I was like number 8, and it was just an episode. It wasn't even my whole podcast. I was like number 8 or number 9 on the list, right? Mm-hmm. When I just typed in electric vehicles, not podcasts or anything else, typed in electric vehicles, I was number 1. And when it shows what keywords it kicked on, what it highlighted on was electric vehicles. It's in the title of my show. It's Kilowatt, a podcast about electric vehicles. Mm-hmm. So because I had electric vehicles, it's number 1. Now I got to figure something else out, why I'm so far down for EV podcasts. Then I'll figure that out and get that corrected. But in just kind of going to what you said, like nobody knows what kilowatt is if it just says kilowatt. I had to put something in. This is Allison and Steve Sheridan helped me out with this. I had to put something in there that was telling people what my podcast was about. And it ended up working out.
It definitely does, because people search for keywords. If they already know the name of your show, they don't need to search for it. They can just go type in the name of your show and it'll pop right up. That always works. What search is for people who don't know the name of your show. They just know, I want to go watch a new show that I don't know about already about electric vehicles. So they type in electric vehicles, Kilowatt pops right up. That is what that title extension is doing for you. It's absolutely brilliant to have added that to your show.
Yeah. Well, it's Allison and Steve. It's not me. What about using social media effectively?
And this is the thing, folks, you do need to use social media to promote your show. It's the third most effective way that listeners find your show. The key here is just to make sure that you're doing it effectively. So don't just announce, don't just say new podcast is up, go get it wherever you get your download, wherever you download, your episodes. That's not an effective promotion. That's just an announcement and not even a terribly effective one. You want to use that call to action. That is very, very beneficial to them. I'm going backwards here. I should say you should use an attention grabbing hook. So just like you would write a good hook for any other social media post, you need to write a good hook about why someone should come and listen to an episode. It's not because you have a new episode out. It's because of what is really going to get someone to listen to this show. What have you talked about in the show that they are going to want to hear about? Do that at the beginning of your social media post with an attention grabbing hook. Second one is be just clear and concise. Don't try to be cute. Don't try to write in limericks. Tell people here is what the show is about, because you only have 3 seconds at max to get someone to be interested enough to click and to take some, to get down to your call to action. So you want to be as concise as you can. Here's what the show is about. And you just let them know. And then the last thing is set up a beneficial call to action. Make sure that when you are asking them to go and listen to your show, that when they get to the page that you send them to, it's really easy for them to listen to that particular episode or listen to your show in general. Don't make them have to jump through a bunch of hoops. Don't make them have to pick what application they're listening in. Just make it as easy for them as they possibly can. There are dozens of link shorteners out there. There are, probably half a dozen different podcast specific apps out there that are like a link tree where you just enter in the name of your show and it'll give you all the ways that someone can listen. Absolutely do those. As I said, one of the things that I do on some of my shows, I actually create a page on my website called a listen to page. So listen to whatever the name of the show is.com. And that page is just a one page landing page that is formatted for mobile. Here's the name of the show. Here's what the show's about. Click here to listen on iTunes. Click here to listen on Spotify. Click here to listen on YouTube. Those are the 3 most popular ways that people will listen to podcasts. In fact, those 3 comprise well over half of all podcast listeners, the way that they listen. So those 3 I make prominent, and then everything else is just a 4th link to where you get a drop down of here's Pocket Cast, here is Acast, here is Redvine, all the different podcasting apps that are out there. This is what you'll get when you click that 4th link.
Excellent. I think gave some good advice. Rob, how would people support the show if they wanted to not only learn more, because we have a whole different kind of podcast behind the post, well, how would people go and find that?
Head over to beyondthepost.fm. Everything that is our home base. So everything that we do, you're going to find via that webpage, beyondthepost.fm. You'll see a cute graphic up there when you come to it, and then you'll see a bunch of different ways you can link and find out how you can get to our Patreon, or find out how you can get to your YouTube channel, or find out how you can actually get to a listen page with a bunch of different podcatchers on that particular page. Just head over to beyondthepost.fm.
Perfect. And if you want to email us, it's Bodie, Bodie, at beyondthepost.fm, and Robb with 2 B's at beyondthepost.fm.
So, folks, we hope that you found this particular episode, helpful. We try to make it a bit tactical, to hear some things you can do almost within a few hours, that you will see some additional, some additional listeners come in. And if I was just going to pick just one of these things, just tell people about your show. That is the easiest thing to do. It requires you to change nothing about how your show is set up. It's just you telling people, hey, go listen to Beyond the Post. Go listen to Kilowatt. Go listen to the Tech John. Go listen to Daily Tech News Show. Go listen to these shows, and you'll be surprised people actually do it.
Yeah, and I'm going to add, go listen to NosillaCast as well. We're just promoting friends.
One of the OGs, one of the few shows that's been running over 20 years.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening, and we will talk to you soon. Stop this. That's good, Rob.